Awesome. Well, I think we have our next speaker, who is Samantha Karlin. And what I want to do is give you all a little bit of an intro to Samantha. We kind of have a very fun group, and Samantha is actually a newer acquaintance of mine, but I could not believe how much fun this woman has had in her life, helping empower other individuals. She's the CEO of Empower Global, which really conducts accelerators on leadership, cross-culture teamwork, and women's empowerment from various companies and groups. She teaches women's leadership course online where women step into their power, shatter glass ceilings, and drive change. It is called the Women's Leadership Challenge. She's deeply passionate about cultivating empathetic, purposeful, visionary leaders who create environments where people can flourish and leverage their power to bring about social change. Samantha is also the host of Samantha Politics, which is a talk show about global politics and women's rights. She holds a Master's of Arts in Law and Diplomacy with a specialization in global gender analysis and conflict resolution from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. And she's currently working on a book about 21st century leadership, for which she received her prestigious Bellagio Fellowship with the Rockefeller Foundation. She's also a TEDx speaker and a classically trained operatic soprano. So she and Gaby can probably sing their way through this transition, is my thought. Welcome to the stage, Samantha Karlin. Hello, Samantha.
Hello, hello, hello. It's good to see you. And so much, I concurred with so much what Gaby was saying.
Yeah, yeah. What's so funny, because I was thinking, you two could probably just sing a duet and also like hyper manage a broken down business. But
Sing our way through it.
I love your focus on the feminine, your focus on that, particularly as you think about your gender studies and the work that you do, the book that you're writing, and this topic of love in the workplace and how um, love is a differentiator or love is almost essential. What are your thoughts on how to use love in your leadership in your workplace and in your business?
So I think everything starts with love and everything starts with service, right? I went to the Fletcher School. I served at the US Embassy in Bosnia, and I deeply believe in the idea of public service. I came from the Partnership for Public Service, where I must have trained, I don't know, thousands of government employees at the US federal government. And I believe in service. And I think that service and love are very much intertwined. If you think about serving, part of serving people and taking care of them is love. It's giving them your energy and your attention and your warmth and your care and checking in on them. Um, and then, so that's from the workplace perspective, but I was going to give another lens that's slightly more geopolitical, if that's okay.
Yeah, of
That's
course.
not
You know
workplace.
me. Let's
Since
go.
since I know most people are workplace specialists, I'm going to add the political junkie part of it since I'm in DC. So I have this podcast, Samantha Politics, and my last two shows were on Syria and before that in Venezuela. And what we saw in both countries is actually quite similar. And in Venezuela, Maduro has been in power forever, for I can't remember, like 20 years now, and he has had a culture of fear. So everybody basically has been operating out of fear. Loyalty is based on fear, and also he's given people that are in the poorer areas items in exchange for voting for him. It's not exactly that transactional, but like, I'm going to give you all these things and, win your loyalty that way, right? So he was in power and power and power and power. And then the state ran out of money because it's a petro state, which is based on oil. The price of oil drops. All of a sudden, there's no money. Everybody's fleeing the country. Everybody's, daughter, son, niece is gone because there is no opportunity there. And all of a sudden, this woman comes in, Maria Cachino Machado, and she is this like loving, like warm leader who I was talking to a Venezuela and I said, why do people like her so much? She's like, she goes on and she prays with people. She like sits with them in their grief, in their trouble. She's so loving and warm, this woman. And she talked about bringing, your sons and your daughters and your nieces home. This very emotional, music video of like people coming home from all these countries back to Venezuela. And ultimately, what ended up happening is Maduro kicked her out after she won the primary, because he's a dictator. And then a guy named Edmundo Gonzalez kind of ran almost in her place, but everybody knew that she was behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So what ended up happening was that they won the election. And Maduro won for years and years and years. Now, did Maduro recognize this? No. Is Maduro still in power? Yes, because the security forces didn't defect. Edmundo Gonzalez is, in Spain right now. But all of the tally sheets showed that they won, and it was a stolen election by Maduro. Fast forward to Syria. What just happened? Bashar al-Assad, the Assad family, was in power for 50 years. 50 years, so long. And his system of fear and terror and violence fell apart. People were over it. They were sick of it. They were sick of living in fear, living in violence, living in poverty. Again, the money ran out, so a lot of people in the military weren't being paid, and that was really crucial. And a 50-year regime crumbles in a matter of days. So I think what I would like to believe, because we're not seeing the same trend in the US, unfortunately, I would like to believe that love-based leadership ultimately wins. And those two cases do show that it does.
They do.
A lot of political knowledge just thrown in there.
Yeah, no, no, no. I was just sitting here, and now I'm gonna just speak plainly and let you respond. And I know we're sort of like off topic a bit, but we're not. We're all talking about love here and leadership. So it's interesting to me because it's almost as if each corporation, if you will, or each business represent their own institution of love or fear, right? So you might be a business owner on here and you're full of fear, right? And you're full of fear because you're not getting the results you want, and you go down a fear spiral, right? It's very easy when it's a single individual because you can kind of tell, like, I do this and this happens, right? But I've often felt like corporations are almost just like a nation, right? I have thousands of employees that all are reporting into Daimler Chrysler or General Electric or Coca-Cola, right? And that becomes a system of love or a system of fear. People work here because they have to, right? And I need, or I get to, right? Within my own corporation. And it's an interesting comment because, Samantha, the one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is how even the systems with which we deal with money and build businesses, it's like we have systems in place. And I think we're asking ourselves at a level just globally, like, are our systems loving or are they fearful? Right? Like, this is the political question at the end of the day is, do we care about each other? Really or not? And I do think a lot of what we see is showing that people are tired of systems of fear.
Yeah, I
Tired.
totally agree. And what you're saying about the corporation, that's what's I think has been quite interesting about my career is that I've done tons of training for corporate America and work, have corporate clients, but I also have this kind of geopolitical side. And so it's actually quite interesting looking at the trends in leadership that cross both, right? And I think so what we're talking about here too is a transition from what's called transactional leadership to transformational leadership. And so cultures of fear are based in transactional leadership. You don't do this, you're fired. You do this, here's a bonus. Here's a cookie. And it's all based on punishment and rewards and external or extrinsic motivations, things outside of you. If you go to transformational leadership is about inspiring people to, in order to intrinsically motivate them. So they're not necessarily there because they know they're going to get a bonus. They're there because they believe in the work. They adore their leadership. They know that they're serving this bigger purpose in the world, and they feel supported, right? That's what transformational leaders do. People are investing in their professional development. They care about empowering them. They're giving them resources to do things. They're letting them, try out entrepreneurial ideas. They're giving power to them. And so, what we're seeing if we look at the workforce is that especially millennials and Gen Z, they do not want to work under micromanagey, fear-based, I want to know what you're doing every second of the day and you have to lock it out on your calendar. Like, no, thank you. They want to work in an environment where they're trusted and where they have autonomy and they can try entrepreneurial things. They care about social purpose as much as their paychecks. I mean, there really is an emphasis now on social purpose, and you're seeing people leave Meta now after Zuckerberg just made that ridiculous manifesto about celebrating aggression and masculinity in the workplace, which was like, what is happening? How many women in tech get harassed and assaulted? Like, are you an idiot? I hate Zuckerberg.
How do you
Sorry,
feel?
I can't stand that man. Just like, no, and that's also a lack of values, right? It shows me a lack of values. He cares more about making more money than he does about, and not paying fact checkers, cozying up to the Trump administration, than he does leaving a legacy of, actually making the world a better place. And I don't know how you live with yourself with that's
Uh, I, I think that's why I would suggest that igniting loving leadership at every level in our society right now is probably the most crucial, because there will be the men who are lovers of, let's call it lovers of men, and the men that are lovers of all, right? And you think about that with that kind of what you're talking about, right? It really, I mean, absolutely, you get to be masculine here, no problem. Masculinity does not mean mean.
right.
Masculinity does not mean unloving. Masculinity does not, right? Like, I don't understand. I don't understand. Actually, I do understand. The truth of the matter is that we often think that love is a weak position and that fear is the strong position, when in fact it is the exact opposite. Um, and it takes a lot of courage to sometimes take the loving position in your leadership at work.
Yeah, well, and that has to do with gender norms, right? Femininity is always equated with vulnerability. That's why Brene Brown called her book Dare to Lead. The whole thing's about vulnerability, but she calls it Dare to Lead because she's trying to equate courage with vulnerability, because it does take a lot of courage to be vulnerable. If you're the person that always deals with things with your fists, to sit and use your words, to go back to like being a kid, and this is my niece, like, don't hit Tova, like use your words. Like that takes like more courage and insight than just hitting, right? But and people who, it takes a lot to expose yourself and to expose your weaknesses and to um be honest and open with people, because you know yeah, it's hard.
It is, but you know what I've realized is and I know you agree, it's the way out, right? So the way out is through the painful things. And I think about this in a corporation all the time. I cannot tell you, I'm sure you see this, how many times you're in a corporate setting and we're not talking about the elephant in the room. Like, the sales team's not performing. And we'll spend a whole year going around and around about something. And you're like, sales is not working. Why are we not talking about the elephant, right? And maybe someone's sensitive or it's difficult. And reality is, maybe it has nothing to do with the sales team. Maybe the product just really stinks and we're
Mhm.
not dealing with that, or we're not willing to invest in fixing the product. So we're going to keep, what I mean? It's like, unless you go to the place that's hurtful and painful in a business, you don't really fix it
Yeah, I think that's so true. You just weave around and around and around it.
all the time. And then no one's accountable, right? So you get in these systems of fear, and that's why it kind of like breaks down. Because in a system of love, people are accountable, people care, people will talk about it, they'll bring to light something, and then you go, oh, let's deal with it. But if you're in a system of fear, you're like, you know what? That's broken. We're just gonna leave that over there. Let the manager deal with that, right?
I
So
think
tell us, Samantha, a little bit about what it is you really enjoy doing in your work, and where people, what advice you'd give for people who are looking to be better leaders.
What do I enjoy doing in my work? Everything. I'm like I love, I think leadership is the most fascinating concept. I love coaching. I've been coaching for well before I was qualified. Now I'm actually qualified and know what I'm doing. But I was very intuitive from my early 20s to coach, and my mom's a psychologist and she taught me well. But my passion really is long-term growth. And so with my business Empower Global, I really focus with clients on doing needs analysis of employees to understand what are the gaps, what are the strengths of employees, especially at certain levels. If you're looking at middle manager, it might be different than VP,
Mhm.
different than entry level, and then custom designing accelerator programs that are usually a combination of a variety of leadership topics that are done in live trainings, maybe a combination of live in person, retreats online, but always when I say live, like real time, because nobody does online learning. And that's paired with executive coaching for a year. And the results you see are just mind blowing. I mean, because I used to do these, conferences, and it was like you have lots of information, but you don't apply it. And the accelerator model is just brilliant. And I came up with it with my women's leadership course. The women meet every other week for 2.5 hours. It's only 8 women, and it's a year. And it's a year of learning things from speaking truth to power to deconstructing your inner patriarchy to creating social change to finding your intrinsic power. But they're accountable to each other. They're accountable to me as a coach.
Mm.
And you just see women, it's crazy, like just the most insane results that I never anticipated. Running for Senate, like bringing in $800 million to their asset firm, just stuff. It's wild. So that really, I get really excited about designing those custom accelerators for companies and organizations.
So tell me about when you talk, I'm just take a look think about it. When you talk about the inner patriarchy, what does that mean for someone who I'm curious about it for both the male and the female who might be listening. What do you mean by that, and how does that affect mindset and your leaders?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with the male first because I think that's actually the more interesting part. So there's an organization called Equimundo, founded by Gary Barker. It used to be called Promundo. He started it in Latin America, and he started it to get youth away from gangs in Latin America.
Mm.
And he he joked to me when I first met him, they had soccer leagues and then they would talk about masculinity and feelings after the soccer, but they would sponsor the soccer to get the guys there and then talk about their feelings. And they did this study called the Man Box. And in the Man Box, they looked at men in the US, the UK, and Mexico. And they looked at certain norms of masculinity that are like the old norms you were talking about. So some of them are like physical appearance and always being polished, aggression. I was trying to actually find the study in my computer so I could not get it wrong. But there's certain aspects within the man box that are kind of traditional, doesn't show his feelings, that are very traditional to masculinity. And what they showed is that the more that men prescribe to the man box, the more likely they are to be depressed, commit suicide, have suicidal ideation, the more they conform to those rigid norms of masculinity that are like the old school Trumpian Hulk Hogan norms of suppress your feelings and always be tough and, you know,
Mhm.
oh, self-sufficient and whatever. That actually results in more depression and suicide. And the thing, I wrote this article ages ago that I never published, but we talk about violence against women as an epidemic, but suicide is the 30% more men commit suicide than women. And that's really a serious thing. So like when we talk about gun violence in America, it's always mass shootings, but suicide is actually the worst. And the amount of men who feel as if you know, there's this weird hero's journey portrayed with suicide that there's somehow this feeling that, and it makes me so sad that it's better to kill yourself than it is to admit weakness, like you were saying before, right? And to ask for help. Uh, and so I think part of if teaching a men's class, like deconstructing your inner patriarchy, is what does it mean to be a man? What is masculinity? How can you celebrate being a man? It's not saying go be a woman. I think those polarities are healthy and normal and fun and important, but like, what does that mean to you, and how do you embody it in its healthiest form, both for you, your partner, your company, the world? Uh, so that's the masculine side. So I'll stop there and just before I dive into the other piece.
Yeah, no, it's beautifully said. So I truly believe that men are in a crisis in the modern world. I don't think that's new to say. Um, and it's interesting, right? Because the more that we get connected, the more we can see examples of potentially other successes and lives and things that we can compare ourselves against, which is obviously a thief of joy, right? And you think of men making those decisions, it's really because at some point you're not feel like you're worthy or you've stepped up to the plate. And we're in a world in which that definition of protect and provide, right? That provide piece is increasingly hard for everyone to do, right? As we continue to see competition, we will continue to see potentially bad uses of AI, right? And the removal of just really good work for humans that have been able to sort of grow up in countries thinking, hey, if I do these good things, I'm going to have a good life. I'm going to have a spouse and I'm going to have a house, a place to live and good food, right? And we're in a place now where we're going, oh, do our systems promote that? Do they
Mm.
really promote that? And to your point, I think it's actually both females and males that are looking at their checkbooks going like, can I afford a house? Is there going to be a place for me? I'm just talking about en masse, right? And so to your point, what is it to be a man? If those things were associated with protect and provide, well, what am I protecting you from? Right? It's almost psychological aspects that we're moving to protection, protecting you from your phone. I'm protecting you from, seeing yourself in a bad way. Those are very psychological. Those are very deep levels of protection that we need. I don't have very often now, a saber-toothed tiger that's going to come take me down. That's just not happening, right? Maybe I have a neighbor. And then on the provision side, right, on the provide side, it's like, wait a second, as women are taking on more and more capability, am I okay with a supportive role potentially? Or, that's not what I was told I was supposed to be. So I completely understand this incongruence between, again, expectation and the delivery society's given you as to these are the things you will do in your lifetime. And you take on certain behaviors that promote that. So there's this inequitable exchange. You're like, wait a second. I've learned how to hold my feelings back. I've learned how to make really strong decisions, and I don't have a job. But
Mm.
I'm not worthy. I messed up, right? And I think every group feels this. And I think it's so interesting because whether you're LGBTQ or whether you're a person of color, whether you're a woman, you have these certain things where you go, okay, like these women are soaring, but I'm in this group, right?
Mm.
These LGBTQ people are soaring, but I'm in this group. And once you sort of identify yourself as, man, that's hard for me, you kind of go, what do I do? Like, I can't be the best version of myself. And I think we see that with a lot. I see that in a lot of men who sort of have spiraled down into, I'm just not one of those guys, so I'm one of the nots. And then it's
Mm.
really hard to shift your thinking out of that. And it's true for all humans though, right? The conversation we're having, it's true for all people. I just didn't think we were so cognizant that it's true for men too.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think you're so right about that identity kind of being called into question of like, you're right. Like, if that's not my role, like, what is my role? What is my purpose? Um, and then the other piece too is, something you mentioned is comparisons, right? And as a coach, you always say comparison is the thief of joy,
Yeah.
right? And one thing I've really focused on since I was in my 20s and actually started coaching, I started with men. I was coaching men on
Mhm.
confidence building and self-esteem. And, I really realized that part of building people's self-esteem is helping them understand who they are. It's that in order to stop comparing yourself to others, you have to have a strong sense of individuality and identity of who you are, or else you'll keep comparing yourself. And so, like when I coach, I do a lot of personality assessments, strengths assessments, values assessments, all of these things. I designed something called the intrinsic power map to kind of identify all the pieces of you. And now I'm utilizing AI to expound upon that by combining a lot of the personality, like all of the assessments
Yeah.
into an elevator pitch or pulling out your strengths or what would you say about me? Really cool ways you can use it. Uh,
Yeah.
because people need that individuality or they'll keep comparing themselves. And once they really understand who they are, that locks in their confidence and also their leadership style.
For sure. I want to add just two thoughts that I had. So one was I'm curious how this resonates with you as I think about like a world of like I often hear, white men, right? So there's sort of like the man and the position they have, and then you have the white man. But I've noticed that um, if you're the dominant in any society, if you're the success marker, right? If you're the privileged, you also have to keep up the appearance of everything being together. Like, even when it's not together, you have to look like it's all together. In working with healthcare leaders that are maybe running a hospital clinic in a small regional office in Texas, you're struggling to make ends meet. There's issues with this or that. You're not sure if there's going to be, but to the people in that area, you are the healthcare center. You need to look like you're running the local port. You're the local mayor, right? And you're like, yeah, we have a huge homelessness problem. We're struggling with finances. And it's like you still got to look like you're together. And I always think about what kind of it's like the same pressure of that. I'm going to call it the masculine. I feel like it's that same kind of thing where you're like, but if you don't have it together, who does? Right? Wait, does the emperor have no clothes? Are we all like screwed? Like, right? So there's this sort of thing as the leader, like you always have to look apart, a confidence level. And so the vulnerability, I guess I was just expressing that because I've noticed that the creative thinking often comes from the others because the one who's holding up the boat has to look like they know what they're doing, or at least they feel that way?
Yeah, I think there's a couple nuances there. One, I believe in kind of grounded optimism for leaders, right? That the research shows people want optimistic leaders who say, even though COVID is happening, this is the plan, here's our way out, blah, 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 blah. They don't want leaders who are like, COVID's not happening. You don't know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. Everything's fine. Like that's just denial, right? To another level. Like go drink, I think it was Lukashenko said, like, go drink vodka in a sauna and it will get rid of COVID or something. Just bonkers crazy. And so there has to be that grounded optimism, right? But the groundedness is being like, this is what and that's the transparency. Like, this is what we know. This is what we don't know. We're going to keep in communication with you about XYZ. Here's what we're allowed to tell you, because this has come up a couple times with leaderships. Here is what we are permitted to tell you, or what we are allowed to tell you. Here's what we cannot tell you for security reasons, whatever that is, or we don't know yet, and we don't want people to panic. And I think that groundedness but also still being optimistic is important. And the other piece of that is that's why I teach a leadership course, is because all the women come to my class and that's where they get to let down their masks and go, oh my God, I've been keeping it together all day. You're not going to believe what happened with this pain in the butt employee, or, our numbers aren't right, or, the CEO hasn't raised enough money and we're going to go under. Whether it's private coaching or in my class, or men too. I get men, when I'm coaching men, they are, I think, even more pressure to keep it together. And sometimes it's like the floodgates open when they walk into a coaching session because they're like, finally, I can talk to somebody about what's really happening. Which is why I think coaching and having, groups and leadership courses and community is so important, because you don't have spaces to let your hair down because you do have to look like that. I think you can show a little bit of vulnerability. People relate to it, but it's different for genders. Like Hillary was actually criticized in 2016 for not being more vulnerable, for not connecting more emotionally. And they talk about one experience where she did cry and everybody was like, oh my God, like she's a person, because she was seen as too stoic, which of course she learned that was how we were supposed to be a politician. I think it's different with men, right? So that's also important, is to understand those gender dynamics in leadership.
Yeah. It is, I don't know if it's different in men. You think that the emotion, the ability to store emotions different, or what aspect?
No, no, the how much permission there is to be vulnerable in a certain company, society, industry, culture. I think different industries have different norms
Yeah.
uh, of what is like permissible, frankly, and um, political parties. I mean, there's different permissions for you if you're a man versus a woman, and in what society, right? In certain cultures and countries, it's different. So it's nuanced, but I think it is changing in that what people don't want is somebody who's all work all the time, who has no personal connection to you, who has so much together that they're like, okay, time to go home now. And they never connect on a personal level. They never say, because they want a leader sometimes who says, hey, I was there. I went through that. Like my spouse had cancer, or we had infertility, or whatever that was. Those moments of vulnerability really connect with people, but in a way where they're not burdening you with their trauma that they haven't resolved. Be
Yeah.
vulnerable in a way that, like, I'm going to show you I have been in your shoes and I have empathy and I'm here, but not in a way where I'm going to all of a sudden unload all of my grief from the past on my employee, right? That's, I think, part of the boundary.
Agreed. Agreed. And that's why, it's interesting because it is, as a male leader or a female leader, either, right, or if you're non-binary, getting everyone to participate and feel safe participating, right? And to speak out, to your point, whether it's the vulnerability aspect or they're pointing out a challenge, is so important, because they're going to show you what you need to see, what you don't see, right? Whether it's emoted or not. um, let's talk a little bit, Samantha. There are two gifts, I think, that you're giving. One is a more immediate term, and one is more long term. For people who really are curious about what you do and want to maybe learn and improve themselves and get to know you better as well, what are those two things that you're sharing with the group today?
Well, Helmut was about to kill me because I was not responsive as
Okay.
Disney World. Love
It's
this.
heroic, heroic, heroic.
I just put it in the chat. I am hosting literally right now for the first time ever a 9-day free masterclass series. It is at 7 p.m. every night until next Tuesday on feminist leadership. It's called the Feminist Leadership Formula. First day we talked about, I don't remember anymore. Yesterday we talked about your intrinsic power map. The first day we talked about the state of women in the world and what we have to look at. Tonight we're talking about feminist leadership principles. Tomorrow, mapping change. I have speakers who are graduates from my paid Women's Leadership Challenge course that are speaking at almost every class in relation to the topic. Some really amazing and inspiring women from across industries. I saw Kirsten's in tech. Tonight we have a PM from former PM from Google, who's now an app founder. But also then tomorrow we have somebody who is the head of a civic action participatory lab called Movilizatorio in Colombia that does social change and policy change. So it's all over the place. So it's free. I don't know when I'm doing it again. So if you're interested, definitely register. Even if you can't make all the classes, I post the replays. They'll be up for the week. So if you want access to the replays, definitely just register for the course. And then the second thing is I believe for VIPs is, actually, suit me to put this, I had 3 freebies. Another one that's just in the chat now is called Mapping Your Happy. I do a workshop called the Neuroscience of Happiness, where you do a PERMA assessment, which is free, which is a model of human flourishing. And then this Mapping Your Happy guide kind of walks you through, based on your assessment results, what are the areas you need to work on and what are some guiding questions to help you get there. And then the third thing for the VIPs is an hour-long leadership assessment, no charge. I'm going to have you take 2 assessments before you come to it and work through what are your areas of growth and opportunities to expand in 2025, and also what are your strengths. So those are the freebies.
Awesome, which is a lot of really great value. So for those of you who are here, the series sounds incredible. And if you're able to attend any of those, I think it's going to get a lot of value out of that. And then there's the other two that, you know, you can take advantage of. And we'll share all those in the notes of this recording, and also in our freebies that we send out afterwards. Thank you so much, Samantha. I'm so excited about what you're doing in the world and how you're changing people's mindsets as they think about what it is to be a leader.
Thank you. And thank you for putting this extravaganza together of all of these extraordinary people. And I'm sorry I forgot to put up the background.
Sure. All good. But you have one.
I do have a background. It's not like my cat hanging out on the couch or whatever. And thank you to everyone here for attending. I mean, I think just lastly, I mean, leadership is just it's such a journey, and you're just always learning new things, and it always changes. And as you change and get older or whatever, like the political system changes, things shift. So it's constantly adapting. And I think the most important thing is to stay true to your values through all of that change. So I'll leave with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Otherwise, if you're not the source, no one is, right? Or
Don't
you'll
be,
let
don't
some
be Zuckerberg.